Oh, so that's how you do that.
Fear is a liar. Fear is a liar. Why do I say fear is a liar? I will tell you why I say that. Because I've helped thousands of people be able to go and install their plank on their own. And a lot of them had fear that they weren't going to be able to handle that installation. They feared screwing up. Even if you screw up, think of it like this. It's one plank, maybe two, maybe it's a dozen planks, who knows? But most of the time anyway, you're going to be able to take a plank that you screw up a cut on and use it somewhere else. So it's not really a screw up. Let's say you install an entire room, you realize that maybe you screwed something up. You can take that plank apart and put it back together again. So there is nothing to fear. And also, I feel like I've got this video that you're watching right now so packed full of things to help with your installation. You have no reason to fear. This one board, this scrap piece of plank that I have in my hand is going to save you hours on your plank installation. And I call it a cheater board. It's a cheater board. And I'm going to show you inside this video later on exactly how you can make one of these cheater boards and how it's going to help you. So here, let's watch. Now, I like to take the doors off because it makes it a lot easier to do your installation, and you'll be able to cut the jambs a lot easier. And when you're installing into closets and through bedrooms, it's just going to be a lot easier for you to have those doors off. Now, carpet, when you are pulling this up, you want to get all of the carpet up off of the tack strip around the entire room. And if you have any closets that are larger, like walk-in closets, just separate those. It's going to make it easier for you, especially with the backing not scratching the paint or the door jambs. Now, cutting the back of this carpet is going to be a lot easier also. Plus, you're not going to cut into the pad where it's going to be a bunch of small chunks that you have to tear out. Roll that carpet up into a small, manageable chunk, tape it up, and it'll be easy to carry out of the house. Now, this is a stand-up scraper that you can buy. You just slide it underneath the pad, and it's going to take most of those staples up with the pad, making the tear out really easy for you. Now, as far as trim goes, if you're not installing quarter round, I would recommend just pulling your trim off. And what I do is I just get started in like an outside corner right there. I wiggle the pry bar all the way down the wall until it gets out enough where I can get a good bite with the pry bar and not put a hole in the sheetrock. And the nails are easy to get off by just bending them back and forth, and they'll snap right off. Now, we have a situation here where we have to remove a vinyl and a 1/4-inch subfloor. We have to cut around cabinets with an oscillating saw. Well, here, I'll talk to you more about it. You can feel it when you cut through that vinyl and then through the subfloor. You can usually feel it give, and then it hits the next subfloor. If you don't feel that, you just want to know that this is only a 1/4 inch thick. You don't want to be sending this blade down the floor into the floor a 1/2 inch, because now you're cutting into your other subfloor. Now, I like to cut the vinyl floor in sections using a circular saw. To find the depth, you just want to put the saw on top of the floor that you're cutting and then drop the blade down to the floor you're cutting to. Do a test cut and then just cut a chunk out so you can make sure that it releases easy, and to check to make sure you're only skimming the floor underneath. Now, again, I like to just cut this in 3x4 sections. Once you get to a wall, you won't be able to get all the way, so an oscillating saw really does the trick on being able to finish those cuts all the way to the wall. Then just take a broom and sweep every time you make a pass, and this is going to help you control dust, because you can see even with a vacuum, you're still throwing dust up in the air. Now, I use a 3-foot pry bar to get underneath, deep underneath these sections that we're cutting, and you can get some really good leverage still. So I would just recommend that you would get one of these bars. Now, you're going to have a lot of staples to deal with. You can hammer these down underneath toe kicks. You can use an oscillating saw with a bimetal blade to cut these staples right off. You can also use a pliers. Just grab the head of the staple and then just rock your pliers back. Now, obviously, that's going to be a little slower. Then you want to check the floor for dips, and I'm going to show you right now how to find those. The level was flat there and flat there, but there was a dip there. You would just mark a line, and then if it still went right there, you'd mark the line where it ended. And then if it started coming in right here, then you would just mark where it ends. And then if right there it was flat, then you'd come straight across. And then you do the same thing this way. So if I bring it back here and now it's all flat all the way, I know that this is the area that I need to fill in, and then just kind of figure out how deep it is by using a pencil and marking it with another pencil. Then you just measure to see what it was. And if it's a 1/4 inch or if it's less, just use that size notch of trowel that you have. So what I mean by a notched trowel is we're using a tile trowel here. Now trowels come anywhere from an 1/8 inch all the way up to an inch as far as tile trowels go. And what I do is I fill in the thickness that I needed. Now our dip here was about 3/8 of an inch, so we used a 3/8 notch trowel here. And now we're using thin set. You can see some ridges that are left behind. We'll have to come back once this dries and fill in the rest of that. But you can see how easy this is to screed with a straight 2x4. And again, we're using thin set here, a modified thin set that has latex in it. I prefer to use thin set, but now you can decide for yourself. Now we have some smaller areas where we had some dips that we filled, and we used a different product called Henry's 549. You can find that at Home Depot or Lowe's. Now for you guys who have concrete slabs out there, this is a cup grinder. You should be able to rent this. No, you just attach a vacuum to it, and this is what you can use to grind any humps in your concrete slab that you might find. Now I also want to talk to you about furniture and show you the beautiful thing about plank is that you can work around furniture in a room. You can move it to one side, install the plank, and then once you get up to the furniture, you just move it to the other side. You can see how we did this in this living room, this dining room, and now in this kitchen. You can see we have this fridge here. So what we are doing right now is we're installing the plank where the fridge goes, and then we're going to move that back into place before we finish the rest of this plank. Now here's a cool little tool that you can check to see if your rental store has. We'll slide these under the fridge. So they go all the way under. Just plug these in. I just flick this switch. Now, see how easy this fridge moves? You can see how handy this would be to have. Now go check your rental store, and if they don't have one, I would just tell them about it and recommend that they get one, because I know many people would benefit from this. Now this is a power jam saw, something else you can rent. Now this is something that we used to use before they came out with oscillating saws. You can see when you cut your jam that you want to be able to slide that plank underneath freely, and that it goes deep under. So get all of that out of underneath that jam. You can see the gap that that power jam saw leaves. That's one of the reasons why I don't like to use that. You can also use a handsaw, but it's going to be difficult to get into a tight area. So an oscillating saw is really the way to go. You can make precise cuts with it and get into tight areas. Really good tool to get. I'm measuring the hallway right now to try to find a center point. I got 47 inches. So I got 47 inches here, and I measured the hallway in a couple of different spots just to see how straight it is. You can see I got 47 inches there. So if I want to divide that in half to get the center of this hallway, I come up with 23.5. I want to stop right now and talk to you about why I'm measuring the hallway. Okay, so now the hallway is like the center hub of everything in your house, right? Now, I don't mean that it's in the center of the house. It could be anywhere inside the house, but it's usually the hub of everything. It connects everything together, like the bedrooms, the bathroom, laundry rooms, stairways, living rooms, family rooms, kitchens, dining rooms. It's always usually the hub to everything. So it's nice to use that as a tool to decide some things. Okay, for example, that using the hallway is really going to be a good way for you to decide plank direction. You should run the plank the long way down the hallway for a few reasons. It looks nicer. It looks a heck of a lot nicer when you run it the long way down and you have the same size piece running down both sides of that hallway. Man, does that pop and look nice. It's going to look professionally done. You're going to love it. You're going to be proud of yourselves. Everybody who comes and sees it's going to love it. The other thing is it really gives the hallway a lot more strength when you run the plank the long way down the hallway. Now, some of you are in a situation where you have an L-shaped hallway, or you have multiple hallways in your house. I would just focus on the hallway that's most important, the one that's the most visual, the one you're going to see the most, and use that as your point where you're going to base your installation off of. Now, the other thing is I like to control where that plank is going to land inside the doorways going into these other rooms. The reason why is because I don't use transitions, okay? Now, I know some of you are going to say, but Joe, the manufacturers state you must use transitions in doorways to break the plank, right? I've been doing this for 15 years professionally installing, and I can tell you I've never had an issue. But if I was to have an issue where it buckled or bubbled somewhere, I'd easily be able to take out my oscillating saw, which is one of the best tools that you can buy anyway, and cut a channel out of that plank right underneath the door and add a T-mold. Boom, problem solved. So why wouldn't I use transitions? I will leave it into your hands on what you want to do. Now, I like to control the plank then, where it's going to end in that doorway, because if it ends somewhere right in that doorway, inside in the door jamb, it's going to be a lot easier to move into other rooms. If you have to take a plank and wrap it around both sides of a door jamb, that could be a sticky situation, and you could be working on just those couple of planks for a few hours. You don't want to do that. You want to try to avoid it. Now, sometimes it's not always avoidable, but it is going to be for majority of the doors that you're going to go through. The other thing is almost 99% of the time when I base my layout off the hallway, everything else in the house falls into place nicely. So that is why I'm measuring the hallway. So here, let's watch. Now I'll make a couple of marks on the floor at the 23.5 inches in two different spots of the hallway. We're going to extend a chalk line across those two lines. I'm going to pull up on this chalk line and then release and get a nice solid line. Alright, so if you come down here with the camera, you'll see I'm pretty close to being on the joint on the line there, right there, and then down here. Same thing, right? I have the hallway centered right now. So I'm gonna have a small piece on both sides. I don't like that. I don't like that. I wanna grow that piece bigger. So I need to do a half a plank. I can move this a half a plank over. Now this is the only math that you really need to do. Everything else can just be either written down as you go, or you can just use your tape measure, and I'll show you that. So 7.5. If you take 7.5 and you divide that by 2, you're gonna get 3 3/4. Okay, so my plank is 7.5 inches wide, and that is why I'm dividing mine by 2 and getting 3 3/4. Your plank is going to be different probably than mine. You're probably going to have 5 inches, 6 inches, whatever that is. Just get the measurement of your plank. You divide that in half, and now we're going to move that over the half a plank. I want to move this line 3 3/4 inches that way. That's the half a plank. Now I'm going to do this real quick. I'm just going to draw my lines, and then I'm going to show you so that you really understand what I'm trying to do here. If I move this over a half a plank, which is right there about, now that is what I mean. You see how I grew both sides. If I was going to leave this like this, it's something that I want to avoid is if this stuck out an inch right there, and that's where the seam was, I would then have to wrap this plank around both sides of this jamb at one time. And I really don't want to do that because it's a pain in the butt. Now by me moving this over the half a plank, now my plank is going to end up being about halfway in the door. Whoa, Joe, whoa. I want to stop right there so I can clarify this moment that I should have done in the video, but I'm going to do it right now. So I measured from the line 3 3/4 to this side of the line, and I made my mark. You've seen that. You can do it on either side of the line. So I could have measured to this side of the line, the 3 3/4 of an inch. I just want to stop and clarify that, because either way, either side of that line, you're still going to get the same result, and you'll see the result right now. So here, let's watch. Okay, so now that we know that I'm going to move this over a half a plank, I'm going to make a mark here, and I'm going to make a mark down there, and then we're going to snap this line, and we're going to extend it throughout the living room. Okay, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to start our plank over here, and this reference line is what we're trying to get snapped all the way across this room. Super easy to do, and by doing this, we're going to be able to start where we need to start to be able to control where we want our plank to land inside the hallway. You want to get yourself one of these string lines because it's going to help you be able to stretch that across the entire part of the floor, and you're not going to leave any chalk on the floor. And once you're ready to snap your line, then you'd switch back to your chalk line. So what we're going to do with the dry string line is we're going to bring it across both of those marks, stretch it all the way across the house, line it up on those 2 marks that you made, and then you can slide your marker underneath the string down here, and you'll be able to have your mark in the floor on where you need to snap your line to. Now you might not have 3 people to help you to see if this goes across these lines. So down here on this first mark, what you can do is you can take a screw and stick it into the center of that mark. Let a little bit of that screw head stick out so that you can take the end of the string line, tie a loop on it, put it on the screw so it will swivel off of that screw. And so once you get that mark down there, then you're going to just snap this line all the way across, and now you have your reference line. Now all from here, it's really super easy to get our layout going and get started and get this vinyl plank done. Now I want to show you here real quick what we're trying to do here. I want to put down 3 or 4 rows of plank to establish a good solid foundation, and to determine where those are to be positioned, we want to measure away from our chalk line that we snapped on the floor a certain amount of planks. And so I just extend my tape measure over 10 different planks that I put together on the floor to come up with that amount that we need to be away from that chalk line. Now I'm just measuring the face of the plank. I'm not including the tongue or the groove, so just the face. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that this is where we are going to start, and now we have this line right here that we have snapped so that we know exactly where our plank is going to land. Now we need to know exactly where we're going to start so it does land there. So simply is all we do is we lay out 10 boards, just like I showed here and I'm showing in the video. Now what we want to do is we want to get this line transferred into this room so it runs all the way across it, so we can measure from that line to these planks to make sure we get it straight and that we start in the exact spot that we need so that it lands in this hallway. Now this is really simple. Is all you do is you lay out your 10 boards like I'm showing here and in the video, and you want to just measure these boards. You don't need to even write anything down. Just keep moving your tape measure. So if you measure from here to here and it's 70 inches, you start at the 70 inches now over here and measure out again until you get to a point where you want to put your line in here. I would just figure somewhere in here, so just quickly measure from here into here anywhere. Say it's 10 feet. We'll just figure out how many planks that would be closest to. So for instance, I'm just going to throw out a number. Let's say my planks are 7 inches and I want to go out 20 planks. That's 140 inches. So I'd measure from here out 140 inches, make a mark. Same thing down here, from here out 140 inches. Now you could take that dry string line method that I showed you, stretch it across so you can get your next mark over here, and then you would just snap this line all the way across. Now you have your reference line to measure from this line to your planks to get this straight. Now both vinyl plank and laminate have a locking system. There's the female side and the male side, otherwise known as the tongue and the groove. You want to be sure that you stick the tongue side against your starting wall. Now I like to lay out the plank to get going here, make sure I don't have any patterns that are lining up with each other, and then once I get going to put that together, I'm going to pull that row out in front of the vents that are in the floor. I like to leave at least one row out, and I'll talk to you more about that later. You also want to be sure that you don't have too small of a piece, so I needed to adjust this over a little bit so I could get a larger piece. Now I'm going to talk about this more later, but I reverse the plank when I'm marking my cuts. I put the groove towards the starting wall now to mark my plank, and now I'll go and cut that and I'll be able to install this in here. And again, I'll talk to you more about this in a little bit. I get asked a lot, why aren't you leaving an expansion joint? Well, if the sheetrock is up off the floor and your flooring slides under, there's a ½ inch right there that you're going to get. Now, not all plank comes with an attached pad. So if your plank does not come with an attached pad, and even though your manufacturer says that you don't need one, I'd recommend that you put one down. And you can see in these videos, you're going to occasionally see the blue pad that I'm using. Now, this is Quiet Walk. It's a really good, dense underlayment that you put underneath your plank. And I would just highly recommend that you use that. It's going to help with sound deadening. That's like one of the most important things about vinyl plank or even laminate that you want to have when you're walking across it. So it really helps with the sound deadening. Also is going to help with moisture. So there's just a lot of benefits to using a pad. So if your plank does not come with an attached pad, I would highly recommend that you use one. Okay, so we're going to continue to lay out our plank here. Now there's a couple of things that I'm keeping in mind. Like I said earlier, I don't want the same pattern to line up. And we're doing a random installation here, meaning that there's no specific rhyme or reason to what we're doing with the butt joints. We just don't want them to line up, and we kind of want them to be a little bit away from each other. So now I'm just going to continue on, and I'm going to start putting these next few rows together so I can build a solid foundation. And as you can see, I'm just laying it out. Now this next board that I have right here was the same exact pattern as the one before that. So I'm going to move that out of the way and use that down the rows a little bit farther. Now you can take some piles of plank that are the same patterns, just put them in a pile, in different piles, and then you can select from them and make sure that you're really controlling on where you're putting these patterns. Now, as you can see, I am putting this plank together with the cross joint, the butt joint. I put the butt joint in first, and then I slide the long joint in, and I'm using this tapping block here to help me with this. Now these tapping blocks are something that you can find online, and I'll have a link. I'm going to show you actually a little different one than the one that I'm using now. The one that you see me using is actually an older one, and it's not available anymore, but they do make one now that is very comparable to that one. It's really nice, very heavy duty, well priced, and you're going to want to get that probably. Now you can see here I'm again reversing the plank, marking my cut, not using a tape measure here. Now you can get one of these cutters. I do have this. Now I do this for a living. That's the reason why I have this cutter. If you have laminate, you can cut laminate with a jigsaw. You don't need to buy an expensive cutter like this. And vinyl plank, most of that can be just cut with a utility knife and a speed square. And we'll talk more about that even a little later. So now that we have our 4 rows done, go ahead and grab a piece of plank and cut like some 6-inch scraps. 4-inch would even work. Just lay these out, and you're going to put one on each end, and then you're going to put one on each seam. Now you see I leave a couple rows out here. This is exactly why I do it. It makes it easy to come back later on and cut these last 2 rows in. It's super easy to do it this way. You get precise cuts. Don't have to worry about being short on the vents. Like I like to come out in front of the vent like you see. Avoid cutting those in the beginning. You're going to get a solid floor by doing it this way. Now you want to take your plank, your rows that you just installed, measure a certain amount of planks away like we talked about earlier in this video. Make sure you get your 4 rows perfectly straight. Now you're going to go through, you're going to secure this floor with screws. Just screw it right down into the subfloor. Really going to be way better than those cheap spacers that you get at Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards, wherever you're going. Okay, so now if you have a concrete subfloor, what you can do is you can get yourself a glue gun. Now I have a big glue gun here. Of course I have a big one. I do this for a living, right? So I have the big, best one. You don't need to get the biggest, best glue gun. You can go to Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, wherever and buy a glue gun. What's important is this glue stick that I'm going to share a link with you in the description below. Now that'll bring you to my home page, and I'll show you where that is, but you can see right here in the picture what it actually is going to look like. Now this glue stick is really nice because you can use this for a lot of things, either securing the floor. I even use this for gluing down transitions. So it's something that you might want to even look at just for that. But you just take it and you just want to put a squirt of glue on it, the size of a Hershey's Kiss. Now I'm not talking the plank. Now imagine with me here, okay? Imagination, this is the concrete floor. Now you just want to take your scrap, slide it into the joint of the other plank, and then just set it down on that glue. Now about 5 minutes from now, this is going to be ready to go, and it's going to be secured like it was screwed to the floor. Now when you're all done, you just pry it up and you'll scrape that off with the scraper. The glue will come right off. Now if you have a pad that you have to put down on the floor, just cut a square out where you need to glue it. You can always tape that back in place with some packing tape. Clear packing tape is how I would do it. Now, one more thing, if you have a plank that has an attached pad on it like this does, this one actually comes off really easy. Just pull that off before you glue that scrap down so that you make sure it stays. Now, if you have a plank that the pad does not come off like that, just leave it on. That's going to be okay too. So, with all that being said, that's how I would secure it if my floor was a concrete slab. I'll slide this back end in, and I slide it tight to the other laminate, and now I lift up on it, and I'll give it a lift, and you can hear it click, and then I just tap it down with my hand, and it's in there nice and solid. So slide it in, click, slide it flat down, and then just push until it locks in, and then you can just tap it down. And now you want to make sure that you go through, back down your row, and make sure there's not any gaps in there, that it's all in there good. Right here I got a little gap, you can see it sticking up a little. And that's all you do. And what this is this slides in back behind your laminate, and then right here, this metal thing right here is what you tap on to get the laminate to move that way. This tapping block right here basically just helps you tap this when you have a little gap to get the joints to go together tight. Now, I'm not beating on the floor with this, I'm using it lightly, and we'll show you some more on using this during the installation process here. You want to point the tongue towards you so that it's in there backwards. So this is the way it really goes in, but you're flipping it backwards to get your mark, and that's how I always mark mine. I don't use a tape measure very often at all. Now my cut on this side is the same thing. I just have this piece, then I'm going to reverse it so it's going the wrong way. And you can see I still got my joint on there, so that'll help me with my gap. I know that that's an 1/8 inch, so I just need to go a little shorter, like an 1/8 inch more. And so I'll just go shorter, and I'm just eyeballing that. Now you might need to use a tape measure if you feel more comfortable with doing it that way, but by the time you do about 4, 5, 6 rows of this marking, you're going to figure out exactly how to mark it. So just keep going, and if you need to use a tape measure, then go ahead and use a tape measure. I want you to look at this gap that I have right here. And I'm already a couple rows in, and I just noticed that I have that gap. And this is where that bar comes in. And you can see that I just tapped it and it went. And it closed it up. Now I just used this bar right here, and I shoved it in there, and I took one good whack. Now I want to make sure that I come down to the other side, and I want to make sure that that row did not move everything else down there so that it's touching the wall, or that there's not enough gap in the wall. One of the things that you can do when you use that tapping block is stick a wedge of some sort in the other side, so when you're tapping it that way that it won't push into the wall where you have to come back and tap it back. Okay, so the plank you're seeing right here is called a drop and lock locking system. Now what you do is you stick the long part of the plank into the joint, you slide it over to the butt joint, you drop it down, and then to lock it, you hit it with a rubber mallet, and that will lock it into place. Now this is a simple product to install, not necessarily better than the other where you put the butt joint in first and then go into the other joint, but it certainly is easier. Okay, so I've got one more row to put in here before I get to this wall. And what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna figure now this row that goes in right here, I'm gonna figure that right now. Now I'd just take my cheater board and I'd start making my marks. And just come and keep making my marks. And then I'll come to the corner right here and I'll just figure. I'll come out about 1/4 inch and stay straight on this wall, and I'll just draw my line right there. So you can see there's my cut for this next row. Okay, so I got this piece in, so now basically I just take it after I cut it here now and stick it in, get it in place. And you can see how that fit in there. This is a spot I'll use this pry bar, click it in. So now I can just slide this in, and this one I can actually slide under this time. So I'm gonna feel the wall and I'll pull it out a little bit. I make my mark, I'll come, make sure I'm gonna clear there, I'll make a mark, same thing on this side, make sure I'm gonna clear, and I'll make another mark. So now I'll go and notch this out. And I'll figure out my other cuts right now on this other part. See if I can use this down there. I can. So I'm gonna go and cut both these boards right now. I didn't forget, guys, we're going to talk about the cheater board. I'm just showing you a few clips here on how it works. Trust me, I'm going to show you what you need to do to make one of these cheater boards. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this board in before I put this row in. And the reason why is because I want it to go in there easy. And so what I do is I slide this board in where it's supposed to go. And now I'll take this row and I'll start putting this in. I'll get this out of the way a little bit. Now I have this row in. This is already slid under my jamb there, so I'm not going to have any issues getting it in. Now I'm going to start putting in this next row. And this is just going to be a little bit of work to get it in there, but it's really going to go pretty simple actually. Now I'm going to grab underneath the middle of this board, or I can tap from that side. But I lift up the middle and I keep that end down, and that's how I'm going to get it to lock in there. Now I'll get it in place, and this is where my tapping block comes in. And now you see how nicely that's in. And now what I can do, because I already have this piece in, I can just cut a piece that's going to fit in here and set it right on top of here, and then just use my cheater board still. So I can just set the board right on top of here. Now another method that you can use in these difficult areas, which will come in handy for you throughout your installation, is you can take the lip off of the groove here. Now what I do is I remove that lip, and then the plank can slide into each other very easily. You don't have to lift up at a slight angle like you normally do to get it to lock in. Now here's a small planing tool that you can use to remove this lip. You can find this at any home improvement store, or I have a link online. You can also use a sharp chisel or a utility knife to cut this lip off. Now usually you just have to take one pass down the plank on both the butt joint and on the long joint, but some planks take a little bit more. You might need to take 2, maybe even 3 swipes, depending on how thick that lip is. Now I planed this, and I'm gluing it. What I'm using, this is a vinyl plank, I'm using Gorilla Glue. It's a clear Gorilla Glue. It takes a little bit longer to dry, but it gives you some working time. And I was able to cut under this enough where I could slide this forward, and while it was sitting under here, then I glued. I glued this, and then I glued this. And you can see I just put a little bead in there, so it's not going to squirt out. And now I'm just going to slide it together, and then I'm going to tape it. Kind of pressing it a little bit. There's a little bit of a wave in this floor, so I have to kind of work it into the joint. Then I just take some duct tape, or blue tape if you want, but duct tape sticks a little better to vinyl plank. Just hold it. Press down, and then pull, press down again and rip. Okay, I want to talk to you a little bit more about this Gorilla Glue. Now, I like to use clear Gorilla Glue because it doesn't foam, so it won't ooze out the joints later on like a normal Gorilla Glue will. But what I like to do is I like to just take a wet rag. It's not dripping wet, just moist. Wipe it down the groove before you apply the glue to it. And then the plank that's on the floor, just use the same rag and wipe that part that's on the floor just to get it a little moist. Water is what activates Gorilla Glue. So with that, just go ahead and make sure that you moisten that joint a little bit first. Okay, I'm going to show you how we're doing this going down the hallway now. You can see how I have the plank extended. all the way down there. But basically is all I did is I put 2 temporary boards right in here. Both of these. Now my next row, I know this is where I want to start, so I made sure I didn't have any joints lining up. So I'm putting this together. And now I'm putting together my row that's actually going to go in there. This piece, this is pretty close to where it's going to be, but so 3.5 inches. I'm going to make this doorway here my cut stop right here. And so I'm going to go cut this off, slide that in. Okay, so now I'll go down here. I still have my main chalk line snapped here that you can see. And I'll see where I need to be. I'm at 11 5/8. So now I just go down and I straighten this floor out to that 11 5/8 the whole way. With this marking board here that I use, this cheater board, is all I did is I took a board and I cut off the female end. I leave the male end on, which gives me the gap I want. By the time I run my marker right there, I'm getting the 1/4 inch that I want. And so that's how you make a cheater board. Now the other thing that's nice is my door jambs. I don't have any in yet because this is a new construction house. So for me it makes it a little easier. A lot easier actually. Okay, so I'm making sure my floor is straight off that main line. Now I'm going to shove this piece on for temporary. Just measure since I have a chalk line here. Or to make sure that that is straight, again, I can just lock it in with another board. And now I'll just come down here. So once you know that you're straight, now I can mark this. Okay, so I just went outside and cut this. Now I'm going to put it in place. And now again, I'm going to go through and measure this. See off the main part of my floor where it's definitely secured, where we already installed all of that living room. I'm going off of that measurement. And so what I'm going to do is I have a door here. Now if you had carpet here, you could just pull your carpet back and you could do it this way. But I'm just going to put in temporary pieces to secure this floor. I always put them where the seams are for sure, and then I put one at the end. And now you could put this piece in right here that you cut and then screw it down, like right along the baseboard. I've showed that in other videos. This is just a different way that I do it.
Here's an example of what I mean. And this is a hallway where I installed that last row, and you can see how I screwed this in. And then I can just pull those screws at the very end and fill those holes in with some wood filler.
And I actually really like doing it this way the best. So then I don't have to try to fill in screw holes later.
Okay, so the reason why I do it like this is because those little spacers that you can buy from Home Depot, Lowe's, wherever online, they just don't work. You slide them in between the plank and the wall. You see some people use blue tape to tape them. They just don't work. I like to have a solid, steady floor. It gives you an easier installation. It's going to help you so it doesn't cause problems with planks coming apart and just an absolute struggle going down hallways and into other rooms. So I highly recommend that you use this method. I'm going to show you how to install these last few rows that we left out. And this applies to anywhere where you left a row out. I'm showing you a little trick here. So what I'm doing, because I left 2 rows out at where we started. Now what I did is I took the cheater board and I hooked it up to a scrap. And now this is going to let me reach this board so that when I'm marking along the wall here, this is actually the board that is going to go along the wall. And that's actually 2 planks away. And so what I do is I just attach that cheater board to the scrap and I just follow along the wall like I've been showing you on how you use the cheater board when it's just by itself. And again, the reason why I'm doing this is with 2 boards is because I left 2 rows of plank out. If you left 3 rows out, you could stack up 3 boards just like this with the cheater board and you'd be just fine. Now we're coming up to this vent here, and this is real easy to mark these boards on the vent. So what I do is I line up those 2 end joints right there. It doesn't look like it because one's beveled in because I'm lining up the tongue with the edge of the other plank, but they are even with each other. And then I get it square with the plank and right on the edge, I line it up right on the edge of the vent. Once it's square and lined up at the edge of the vent, then you can make your mark, and that'll be the edge of the vent right there. And then you just come up to the front of the vent like I'm showing here, get that lined up at the vent, make your mark there. Now you're gonna see here, and I'm still gonna mark it, but I'm marking this vent, and some of this plank actually does show, but it's very little, and it's crooked. That vent is cut in there crooked, so I don't need to cut that. The vent cover is going to cover that, so I'm not even worried about cutting that part. But I wanted to mark it just to show you that you can mark a vent out. So now that I'm done marking these boards, I'm going to pull these 2 scrap pieces, or not 2 scrap pieces, but all these scrap pieces out along the wall here that's been holding the floor down. I'm going to get this plank out of place and get it ready to bring outside so I can cut it with the jigsaw. Now I want to show you one other thing here. Before you pull these planks out, you want to mark where the butt joints are on these 2 rows that you're going to pull outside, because you don't, when you reinstall the next 2 rows, because you have to reinstall these rows with new plank because you're taking these out and these are actually going along the wall. You want to mark on the floor where those butt joints were so that when you install the next couple of rows that you're not going to line your butt joints up. So you can see how when I start my first piece here, I made sure it wasn't lining up with that marker. Now, when you're installing this plank, this is actually going against the locking system. We're actually sliding the plank, the groove into the tongue now instead of the tongue into the groove. And so it's real easy to damage this tongue. So I like to use a scrap piece to bang on instead of banging on that tongue, so we don't have any damage to it whatsoever. It just will make sure that that plank's going to go together easily for you. And I just use the tapping block, as you can see, to tap it into place. Now what I do is I slide the butt joint in first. I get the plank as close as I can so it will lay down flat. So that groove is almost touching the tongue, but it's not. And now I'm going to slide it over by just ever so lightly picking it up at an angle, and then I'm going to hit it with my tapping block while I'm holding it up at an angle, and it's going to slide right in there. Super simple to do. Now if you have a drop and lock, you'd still do the same thing. You just wouldn't have to worry about locking it into the butt joint first. And so when you get into these tight spots against the wall where you can't use a tapping block to help you, this is where a drive bar comes in handy. Now this is a heavy duty drive bar. You're gonna have a lot cheaper of one that you can find from Home Depot. I'll leave links for all my tools below if you want to check those out. But just get your drive bar on that scrap piece that you've been using with the tapping block and go ahead and just beat that floor right into place while you're still lifting the plank up normally at that slight angle. Usually don't use this is one that came with the flooring, but you can see I left my gap, and then I'm going to try to nail down into that gap because this is hard plastic, hard to nail into. If this was on concrete you could just glue it, but otherwise I'm just going to nail it. So I'm just using a brad nailer, and then we'll just go through and fill these little holes and we're all done. Now along patio doors I like to also use quarter round. It just looks a lot nicer. In this situation you can see we used an end cap, and I have another video that will walk you through how to do this step by step and how to use it without the track.
Okay, I want to talk to you a little bit about transitions now. This one is a 3-in-1, so it can be a square nose, which is this part. So carpet would go up to that. It can also be a reducer, which goes where you would go from the laminate to nothing. Can also use this from, this can go over the laminate and the other edge can go over tile. I'll show you that in another video, but, and then this could be a T-mold. So I'm going to make a square nose. So what I want to do now is I need to cut this, and this is a tool that comes with it. You can see it's got a little blade in there. So what I do, because this is what I want to make, this is the square nose part. So I'm going to cut this part off. So I just slide this in there, get it nice and flat. Once you get it started, you can kind of see it's cutting. That blade gets in there. At first it's kind of weird to start it, but then you just pull. It just runs right along, forms right along the transition while you're pulling it. And then that just pops right off. And now you can see that's the square nose. Okay, so I'm going to be installing a T-mold now, and this is what the T-mold looks like. Now, what you usually use this for is in between two hard surfaces like tile and wood plank of some sort, and that's going to rest on there. Cut at least a 3/4 inch gap. And so what I want to make sure of here is that this is going to slide under this trim piece right here, and it's not on that side. On this side, it barely does. And I'm just gonna cut just that part. And so what I like to do is I just like to do like a Hershey kiss and let it stick up a little bit. You can also use brad nails, but T-molds are pretty thin and flimsy, and if you do use a brad nailer, you need to make sure you hit it right through the middle. But another thing I like to do to give me instant grab is I use this glue. And so I just kind of put those in between these then. And do the same thing, make a mountain. So now I'll just take my T-mold, slide it where it needs to go. These bend a little bit, so I can bend it to get it underneath. And then just kind of straighten it out a little bit. Hold it down. And you can see it's an inch. Well, I want to add that little extra, so I'm going to actually make it maybe 1 3/16 inches. So that means I want to bring that line 1 3/16 inches this way. And that's where I want to end my laminate. So I'm just going to make a mark at 1 3/16 inches there, and then down here. So now this is going to be my guide. This line right here is going to be my guide to where I want to end my laminate. You can see how I went at an angle there so that I wouldn't come past. That's just dust. And not a track, not the track that comes with it. Just some PL 400 construction adhesive. I like to use the premium stuff. This is something else that we use, and I'll send a link for it. This is from a specialty store. And that stuff actually works the best with vinyl plastic transitions. So now I'm just going to put this in. And I usually like to shoot it right out here where the thicker part of the wood is. Brad nails mainly to hold it in place. So if you're doing this on concrete, you don't need to use brad nails. You can just weigh it down with something. Home Depot, Menards, they usually sell it 1 piece at a time. So I just take it and I'm going to go like a fingertip away, 1/4 inch away from that nosing. And I'm just going to hammer it in. Right onto that strip. And then I like to use one of these tuck knives. This is a linoleum knife. You can find this at Home Depot, Lowe's. And I just like to tuck it in. Make it nice and pretty. Alright, so I'm going to be preparing this right now for a stair nose. This is a stair nose. It's an overlapping stair nose. You can see how it has this thinner part. It's thicker here and then thinner here. This part right here is what overlaps over the plank. Now with the floating floor, you need to have an overlapping stair nose. You can buy a flush mount stair nose if you're going to use this on the stair, where you would use this on a stair like this. When you put your plank down on the stair, you're going to glue that, so it's not going to move. Where this needs to move, so you have to use an overlapping stair nose here.
Okay, so I want to show you here real quick how you need to prep this. You can see that this riser is flush. It has no lip on it whatsoever, and that's what you need to have before you use any kind of stair nose with a floating floor. You need to have that riser flat. You can see here, like in this example on this stair, the nose sticks out from the riser. Well, that needs to be cut off, and you can use that, or you can use a jigsaw or an oscillating saw to do this. It just needs to be flush.
And so now what's going to happen here, as you can see, if I have my stair nose wrapping around that, then this goes to there. So now I'm going to cut the plank right to that line, and that's going to give me the plank right in this lip here, so that it allows to an expansion joint. Now the stair nose, I'm going to put a nice bead a little bit bigger all the way across. Spread it out a little bit. Okay, so now I'm just going to take the stair nose and I'm going to put this in and press down nice and tight. So just a few every 6 to 8 inches. You don't want to step on this for at least 12 hours. Like tomorrow morning or the next day, you can step on it, but I like to give it at least overnight for it to set nicely. Okay, now everything that I've shared with you inside this video, as far as the different steps of the process go, I have videos broken down on each of these steps. You can find these on my YouTube channel. Now, if I've helped you at all with anything inside this video, could you do me a favor and hit that like button? I'd really appreciate it. If you want to see more of my videos, hit the subscribe button. You know the drill with the bell there if you want to be notified. Now, my next video that I'm going to be shooting here within the next week and releasing very soon is a vinyl plank job inside a living room and entry. Now, we went and got this vinyl plank from Costco. Costco of all places. Now, I've been against going to Costco for vinyl plank for many years. I've kind of even chuckled about people telling me that they were looking there, and you'd be very surprised at what I found and what we are installing inside this living room. So check that video out. Now I pray that each of you are blessed, you and your family. I pray that your projects go well for you. I pray for that in Jesus' name. God bless you all, and thanks for watching. Again, I'm Joe Latender. I'll see you soon.
Oh, so that's how you do that.
Oh, you didn't want him in there?
No, I really don't care.
Great, you guys are family. You're at home.
So that's how you do that.
Okay. Do a couple more
You're a
times.
horrible actor.
Nothing. I want you to just do it a couple more times so I got a few takes of it.
So that's how you do that.
Let's do that again. Bring your phone up a little.
Like what?
Right there. Okay. Hold on. Go for it.
So that's how you do that.
Do another one. I liked that one.
So that's how you do that.
Come on. Couple more.
You don't even have to say anything. All you gotta do is look.
Okay, wait.